Welcome back to Property Play. I'm your host, Elena Saradidis. This is a podcast all about real estate and the Canadian real estate market. Today, I brought back Elon from Mortgage Outlet. He's here to talk all things mortgage predictions for 2025. But what I want to start
Ooh.
with, have you seen an influx on insured mortgages up to that 1.5 mark? Like, are we seeing a lot more people take
Um,
that?
I actually don't think the 1.5 is as important as people think it is. I actually think the 30-year amortization is much more important. And there's kind of like two or three reasons why. But the first reason is very simply monthly payment. And, I always like to keep it simple. You got a first time buyer, a nurse married to a police officer. Maybe they make 75 plus 75, so 150 combined. They're younger, just maybe newlyweds. With a 25-year amortization, their payment will be hundreds and hundreds of dollars more, and they might not feel comfortable with it. But with a 30-year amortization, all of a sudden their payment will be hundreds of dollars less. Interest rates are going down as well. So they might feel more interested to buy to get into the market. Even kind of a small condo prices are softer. Maybe they feel they can get a really good deal. So I don't think the 1.5 million and it's one four it's
One
one four
four
nine
nine nine
nine
nine
nine
nine
nine nine
nine.
nine.
Yeah.
Yes, well, that's a separate topic, but I don't know that that's as huge. The 30-year am, but going back though, they get a lower monthly payment. This newlywed couple, but it also means that they're stress tested at a lower amount, which means they can borrow an extra 50, 100 grand or more depending on their income. So it's like, hey, guess what? Your monthly payment is lower, rates are down, 30-year am, and you can qualify for more. Oh, all of a sudden, like, shit, I never thought I could buy real estate. Now I can. So a lot of renters, a lot of tenants might actually start being open to buying. Um, at the 1499999 mark, I've done the math. You basically, and again, I'll use an example, but you need to be like a physician married to a physician because basically you would be getting a $1.3 million mortgage, but you would need to be making around 250 to $300,000 combined income. How many newlyweds or even kind of maybe a couple years married are making 250, 300? So maybe you'll see a little spillover into the 1-1 range, the 1-2 range. I think by far the biggest and most exciting thing is, 30-year am, 500 grand, 700 grand, lower stress tests, lower rates, lower monthly payments. Why would I want to rent? I'm going to get a mortgage. Condo prices are soft. Let's go.
If you're new to the show, I want to kind of go back to what we're currently discussing and just explain the new rules that have come into effect. So, as of December 15th of last year, 2024, a new rule came into play that basically says that if you're a first time home buyer or if you're purchasing a property with less than 20% down, you can now, Elon, you're making a face,
I'm listening, but I think there's a word you left out. A new property,
a new
new
property. Yeah,
construction.
new construction. You can now purchase with 30-year amortization and you could put less than 20% down up to 1.499999, like 1.5 million
Don't minus a
by
dollar.
minus a dollar.
Minus a dollar.
Minus a dollar. You can go up to that range, which before you could only qualify for a 25-year amortization. So not 30. So your loan is now extended longer, which means your payments are stretched out longer. Also, previously you could only go up to less than $1 million.
999,999.
Yeah. $1
Our
million minus one.
it's our most popular purchase price at Mortgage Outlet is
Yeah,
999,999.
but will it still be now that this is happening?
Oh, well, no, because that
Yeah,
was an artificial and regulatory barrier. So
exactly. So,
it still might be, but
so
no.
people had trouble if you had less than 20% could only buy up to 1 million minus a dollar. As Elon will like to remind me, his
Yeah.
face is saying it all.
No, no, but
But
I'm gonna hang on.
now,
Let me interrupt you for a second. I see a lot of social media, a lot of marketing materials related to this 999,999, 1499999. If you, and I know you would never do this, if you send me a purchase agreement 2 months ago for 1 million even, and it was someone that did not have 20% down, I would push it back to you and say, send me the amendment and reduce the price by a dollar. Similarly, today, if someone is getting an insured mortgage and you send me a purchase agreement, which I know you would never do, at 1.5 million and it's an insured mortgage, I would say, give me an amendment for a dollar. So part of brokering is knowing which rules are breakable, bendable, and which rules are completely not. And if all of the marketing is wrong, I actually did a TikTok on this like 2, 3 weeks ago. It's not 1.5 million, it's 1,499,999. Like, move on. But that's my little sidebar. But I'm saving all these people from
Like,
getting amendments and renegotiating. Like, you're going to literally spend everybody's time doing a contract for a $1 price adjustment. You're welcome.
but we're not
You're
going to do that.
welcome.
We're not going to do
You're
that.
not going to do that. There's a lot of bad realtors in this city.
Yeah, there's
A
a lot of
lot,
realtors.
a
There's a lot
lot,
of
a
realtors.
lot
Let's
of
just say
bad
it.
realtors.
Okay, so basically, what we're going back to is if you were interested in buying last year and you were looking at purchasing before that change happened, you might want to relook at buying now because your numbers might look different. Even if your income's not different, even if your down payment's not different, you might qualify for more right now. And that might be the difference between you getting the home you actually like and just settling for something that you didn't really
Or
like.
just renting forever.
Yeah.
I agree.
But what are you seeing in terms of trends? Like, are people going fixed? Are people going variable? Like, what's happening?
So I would say over the last couple years, people were sitting on the fence. I called it the Goldilocks strategy. Not too long, not too short, not too hot, not too cold. Almost everyone was taking the 3-year fixed, like a very large portion of people. Now, in the last couple of months, there's been a lot of questions about variable rates. Now, I use that word deliberately, questions. Many people are still taking the fixed rates. And part of the reason is the delta or the difference between variable and fixed is still depending on your scenario. And especially before sort of prime dropped a few times, it was 1% or more. So now that prime is, has gone down and it might go down again in January and maybe in the spring, there's much more interest. I have what I call, you know, in general, I still like the 3-year fixed. It depends. Are you a landlord? Is it a rental property or a first time buyer? Like there's a lot of context. I like to always start off by saying, I drive a Volvo, my wife drives a Volvo. So like I don't like taking big risks. With variable, it's higher risk in some ways, but higher reward. Maybe rates will plummet and you're going to save a ton of money. But I call it I think I had 3 or 4 or 5 T's. So what are the T's? It's Trudeau, it's Trump, it's tariffs, and there were a couple other T's, and maybe I'll remember. But part of the thing was, and if I rewind 2, 3 months ago, let's say 3 months ago, everyone was saying rates are going to plummet. They're going to plummet. They're going to plummet. And then they're like, well, they might not plummet. And then they're like, no, they're going to plummet. And then they're not going to plummet. And now you have, new US president elect. There's a lot of non-confidence happening with Trudeau. Literally, there could be a new president and prime minister in the next 3 to 6 months. I don't know. So what does all that mean? Like Trump is talking tariffs. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of volatility. Well, in that context, do I really want to go variable? Where if I'm right, I'm nicely right, and I save 15,000. But if I'm wrong, I might be wrong by 25,000. And I'd rather not save 15 if my exposure is 25. And even arguably, if I could save 15 to gain 15, that's not even good enough. I need to get a big reward for that risk. So I still lean towards 3-year fixed, but again, everyone is different. What's the context? All of that stuff. And again, let's see what happens in January. Let's see the commentary, but they're not as, the commentary about rates plummeting. That's not really the sound bites. The other thing that I'm going to say is, again, Bank of Canada, news media, all the chief economists during COVID, rates will be low for a long time. Rates will be low for a long time. Go variable, go variable. Like I've lost faith in a lot of these experts because they didn't get it wrong. They were literally the complete opposite of wrong, where they're like, go variable, rates low. It was actually like rates skyrocketing very quickly. Like they couldn't have gotten it more wrong. So for me to sit here and be like, oh, I have faith in all these experts, they all got it wrong. But again, I'm a big believer in like, what's your situation? I love the word psychographics. And again, I kind of highlighted by saying I drive a Volvo. If you go variable and you're going to watch every news report and every media report and read the internet and text me, 27 times a month for the next 5 years, even if you save $3,000, are you better off? Like if you're psychologically not programmed to accept the risk, the reality, whatever, and you're going to be like, what's on the, oh my God, inflation is CPI is 0.1 higher than expected. It's not right for you. And I actually like to start with the psychographics as a big indicator of which way to move forward.
But it's also like, what are you trying to do? That's the other factor. It's like, what are you trying to do? Are you buying this property and in hope to refinance it in a few months? If you are, or in a few years, like variable might be better. The breaking fee might be lower. Are you buying this property because you're going to live here and you're not going to move until you have kids? And you're not planning to have kids for the next 3 to 5 years. Like they all play a factor on what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Like you and I had this discussion the other day. I have a pre-con that is now being completed and we're closing on it. And I gave the file to Elon and I was like, what do you think I should take? Because of course, like you're the expert.
Yeah.
What should I take? And he's like,
it depends. It depends. My answer is always it depends.
He first messaged me and said, are you planning to sell this in the next like 3 to 4 years? Like, are you going to sell it? And I said, no, because it wouldn't make sense for me to sell it then.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well then this is the proper thing for you to do. Mm-hmm. But this is the first, and I'm pretty open with my clients and with my friends and with whatever. Like I tell people what's happening, what I'm doing.
Sure.
But this is the first fixed mortgage that I'll get. The rest have all been variable.
But I think it's a 3-year fix. So I really, really, really don't like 5-year fixed rates for landlords. Because the thing is, 3 years, if you change we're going to sell, we're going to do this. You're not locked in, and the penalty generally is going to be a lot smaller on a 3-year. But 5-year, if you take that 5-year and like you need, like entrepreneurs need flexibility, and to lock in for 5 years, like 3 years is, again, it's like that Goldilocks, like not too long, not too short. But again, variable rates are a lot higher than the 3-year rate today, right now. What will be in a month, what will be in 12 months is a big difference.
In my decision for this specific property was I bought it pre-construction and I bought it X amount of years ago. Mm-hmm. It was my first ever property purchased. I didn't know at that time, give Elon the piece of paper and he'll get me the mortgage then. Yeah. And did I think about it going through? No, I put more risk on myself than I do everyone else. I'm like,
but it was unknown risk. You didn't know the risk, I think.
At the moment I purchased it, I was 22 years old. I did not know the risk. I didn't know what to do. Yeah. I was like, they told me I don't need a mortgage until I close. Like, sounds great.
100%. Terrible advice.
Now, in all honesty though, like between now and then, could I have gotten a mortgage? Probably. Did I put it on the back burner of everything? Yeah. Do I take the most risk on myself than I do everyone else? 100%. But in my mind, I paid a certain amount of money for this condo that finished. And remember, like, no one freak out because I do have clients that have bought pre-construction. This property closed in 2025. If you have closings happening in 2027, like, we're going to talk later. But yeah, it's closing recently. It's closing in 2025. The purchase price that I paid for it then versus what it's worth now, that makes me uneasy. I could have bought and like in the same street, in the same area for less money now. And if I was going to buy something right now that was resale, I'd probably still go variable because I'd want the upside of when the market changes and the price goes up in value for me to be able to refinance it and pull out the money. But
you can still refinance a 3-year fix.
You can, but there's breaking fees associated to it too. Yeah, you're like,
depends. It depends. If you stay the same lender, maybe not.
Yeah. But I don't see, because I'm analyzing everything, I don't see a path to where in the next 3 years I refinance this property. I don't see a path to where in the next 3 years my upside is there yet. Mm-hmm. Like my upside I'll see on this property is probably looking at 7 years.
Yeah.
That's where I'm kind of, I think 2027 will be a better year for condos. I've mentioned it here before. I really do believe that. I think whatever inventory we have. Is that why you gave me a look the moment I said 2027?
No, I think, listen, I think we're on the same page that like there's nothing being built now. And 2-3 years from now, it'll be like, holy shit, nothing was built in the last 3 years.
So by the time that happens and the prices go up, we're looking at about 2 to 3 years. Yeah. So I'm on a horizon with going fixed. Yeah. Like the property, it's rented, like it's going to be fine. Like I'm going to be fine. It's not the end of the world, but I'm not looking to let it go anytime soon.
No.
But if I can hold it 7-10 years, I'll let it
You
go
might
then.
be able to get out of the 3-year fixed rate with a 3-month penalty.
Yeah.
That's a whole other discussion.
This is why you're the best.
No, that's like a big deal. Can I tell you a very brief sidebar story that's not so brief?
Okay.
I had a client in a 5-year fixed mortgage. Now, generally speaking, it depends. Variable rate mortgage is 3 months of interest. Everyone seems to know this 3 months of interest. Everyone thinks that applies to fixed rates too. 100% does not. Um, so I had a client, they had a fixed rate mortgage. I looked at it, and long story short, it's incredibly volatile, opaque, confusing how to calculate a fixed rate penalty. And long story short, client came to me. They were doing all kinds of refinancing and stuff. I'm like, hey, where are you now? This was, I remember this vividly, Friday at 2:30 in the afternoon, Friday. Where are you now? I'm at my office. I'm like, okay, you're going to go, you're going to leave your office right now, and you're going to go to your bank and you're going to break your mortgage today. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, today, your penalty is $7,000. On Monday, it's $37,000. And I'm not like legit. And it would take me like 15 minutes to explain why, but this is a true story. I would say that 90 to 95% of bankers, of mortgage brokers, of consumers do not know this and do not understand it. Fortunately, I was one, and he broke it on the Friday and everything like kind of worked out fine. But even when you're a good consumer, you're financially savvy, and you go on your website and you're like, bigbanka.com, I enter all my info. Oh, my penalty's $7,000. But if you break the mortgage a week and a half later, you'd think intuitively, if it's 7,000 today, it might be 69.45 in a month. It could actually skyrocket to like $37,000. So, but long story short, on the 3-year rate, which you have, I expect that the overwhelming majority of the time, it will be 3 months of interest.
Mhm.
There actually might be a period in the 3 months where your penalty skyrockets and then it comes back down. And again, if you're ever breaking a mortgage, like talk to someone that really understands it, like super nerdgasm. Like, I'm being serious. The thing is, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's a
And it's like,
fact.
if you don't know how to drive and you take a Tesla to a gas station and you're like, car, gasoline, and it's like, that's like a completely separate thing. This is how fixed rate penalties are.
But this is why I call you when I'm like,
100%.
Elon, what do you recommend I
This is
do? Because
100%.
like,
Yeah.
you know what my portfolio looks like. You know what my
Yes.
intent is. You asked
Yes.
one question. Are you going to hold? Are you going to flip? Like, what are you going to do?
Actually, and I'll even say this, even as a listing agent, you might want to have an understanding of the penalty through your mortgage partner, because if you sell the property for $1 million and then on the day of closing, they're like, you got $1 million minus this, that, and the other. And by the way, there's a $39,000 fee. You won't know until the day of closing. So you want to get ahead of it. And there are times where I don't think it's happened with a listing agent necessarily, but it could be where it's like you need to sell, or like you need to break your mortgage today in the context that you're listing it, because you pay the $7,000 penalty today. If you close in 2 months, the penalty is $37,000.
We actually had this conversation.
I think we did.
We did. And the question that I had for
Yeah.
you, remember, it was back, we had a client.
Okay.
My client was looking to purchase. He was using you for the mortgage. And I called you and I said, I think we're going to get a fantastic deal on this. Like, I think they underpriced it. Like, this is actually wild. The studios or like the junior ones or whatever in this building are selling for the price that they're listing this specific property for. Like, we need to go now. Like, we need to put in an offer. And I'm like, we can put all the conditions, like all the works, like, let's go and put in an offer. I put in an offer for the price that I wanted it for, and I got a sign back. And I remember the agent telling me, we can literally not sell it to you for $1 less than this amount because my client cannot afford to like close on the sale.
Yes, that's
She's
insane.
the seller.
That's insane.
So the seller
This
literally,
is insane.
but it happened.
No, of course it
But
happens.
the seller literally could not afford to close because they
Yes.
didn't have the money to pay the bank the breaking fee or the private lender or whatever the hell they
Yep,
used, the
yep.
breaking fee to be able to do the sale.
Yep.
So like they ran the numbers backwards and forwards and was
Well,
like,
good for them for being on top of it.
well, we were chatting every single day.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
I'm your
yeah.
buyer.
Yeah, yeah.
And the number that we got to, fantastic number, by the way, still like the paperwork went through. And I think even you called me and you're like, this is an actual 1 bedroom. Like, how'd you get this price? Like, this doesn't make sense because it was that good of a price. But in the moment, it was like they were counting the pennies to be like, can we close?
Yep.
Like they closed, but we could not buy it for what I wanted to originally. I'm a little bit of a bully if I'm on the buyer side, let me be
Yeah, of
honest.
course.
But we could not buy it for the price that I originally bought them with because they were like, we can't close. It's not going to
Do you
happen.
want to maybe explain what that means? Because I don't know if people would understand what that
So
means
if
from the
you're a
seller's point
seller
of view.
and you have a mortgage, and let's say, for example, you bought it a long time ago or you bought it recently, you put less than 20% down, maybe you went with a fixed mortgage, you got bad advice, whatever it may be. For you to close on the property, you have to pay out the lender. Okay. So let's say, for example, I have a 500,000, like we'll use whole numbers.
500,000.
$500,000 loan on my property.
You read my mind. That's
That was the
exactly
number
what I
you
was
were going to use?
thinking. Yeah.
Okay, $500,000 loan on my property. I have to calculate in realtor fees, mortgage breaking fees, and everything else, like legal fees as well.
Well, but the mortgage, if the mortgage is $460,000 and there's a $40,000 penalty, your mortgage is 460, 40,000 penalty, 5,000. Who's paying the realtors? Who's paying the lawyers? Who's paying all the other processing? And then your lawyer might say, cool, you need to write me a check for $12,000 in order for you to sell this property, which is very counterintuitive, but the math is the math, especially when there's a 10, 20, 30, $40,000 penalty.
And this happens.
Of course it does.
It's not talked about, but it does happen. It's rare,
yes,
but it happens. It's rare that a seller is selling the property at a price that like they couldn't even imagine they'd be selling it at because they're in such a tough position.
Well,
like,
again, if you bought a property at the peak, again, let's say in Barrie for 1.4 and you sell it today at 1.2, and then there's penalties and you got 200,000 less, et cetera, you as the seller might not be able to close.
Yeah, which is why you would not opt if you didn't have to sell.
Which
you would not opt to sell.
But now it's funny because now I'm thinking about it from the buyer realtor point of view. You actually need to do due diligence because the last thing you want is you help someone buy this 1.4 property for 1.2 and then they're renting and they tell their landlord we're leaving and they're getting moving trucks. And then on the day of closing, the seller can't close. Like you almost want to do due diligence to figure out how big that mortgage is. And like, frankly, again, there's a lot of bad realtors, a lot of bad listing agents. You might want to nudge them and be like, are they going to be able to close? Do they understand that the penalty might be 2, 4, 6% of the balance?
So what I tend to do, and I think this puts me in a negotiation ahead of the curve for negotiating, I pull it. So most people don't know that you can do this. Mortgages are public, by the way. Anyone can go to the landlord, like the land registry building and find out if you have a mortgage on your house, which I think is a complete breach of privacy.
Why?
I feel like no one should know what I owe, if I owe,
but
if I should,
but it
whatever.
doesn't mean you owe. It means there's a registered charge.
It shows the exact amount on
everything.
everything.
But it could show Scotia $1 million, but you could owe them $0 and it's $1 million HELOC. It doesn't mean you owe it. It means that there's a registered charge.
There's a register, but it's still, as like someone that likes stuff private.
Yeah, I get it.
Even like the whole like House Sigma and all these other websites that show the history of homes. And like, it's so easy to be like, oh, I came over to Elon's house. Let me find out how much Elon paid for his house.
100%.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I get it.
I'd rather like that extra step of being like, Elena, you're my agent. Like, can you find out how much Elon paid? Have it a little bit more challenging for someone to find out my information would be ideal. So you pay, I think it's $32. $32 on this website. It's Geo Warehouse. I click the link.
I'll get you a discount.
I buy in bulk, don't worry. Okay. But I'm like, general public. Like I think it's like 19 something. But you click on a button and like within 5 minutes.
Talk to me.
Within 5 minutes, like less, you get a little report that says everything owed on the property. Now, the moment we get that, and it's like, okay, great. We know the past sale price, but did they get a second mortgage on the property? Do they have any liens on the property? Do we know how badly like they're in need of money? And it kind of gives you a little picture of like, do they owe more than what they're currently listed for?
Let's use a real example. So you're buying a condo. They paid $500,000 for it. You look at the land registry, there's a $475,000 mortgage registered because they put 5% down, right? 5%, 25,000, there's a $475,000 mortgage. If they sell that condo for 500,000, well, the realtor fees are going to be 25 plus thousand plus HST. So right there, you're at 475. What about the penalty? What about legal fees? So that person, if they have $0, they actually might not be able to close.
But from the buyer perspective, if you
Yeah.
know the math for the seller,
Yeah.
you can kind of figure out the seller's bottom line.
Yeah.
It's not an exact science,
No.
but you can kind of see there's like, okay, if we're looking at this, this is how much they actually need.
They might not know.
They might, yeah, they might not
They
also
probably
know.
don't know.
But if we know on our side,
Yeah,
it gives us
yeah.
an advantage. And most agents, I can tell you this much, don't pull to find out what is
100%
actually
they
there.
don't. Yeah. Because it's
Like we had a client once, we were putting in an offer on a property. I think we shared that client as well. When I pulled it, there was a lien registered against the property and it was for the hot water tank.
yeah.
It was a $12,000 lien
Yeah.
for a high efficiency hot water tank
Yep.
with a specific company that every time you sell it, you do whatever, you have this property, you have a lien on it. Like they will put a lien on it.
Yeah.
So the lien was transferable to the new owner because they would take the contract. So they would take the lien off and then put the lien back on.
Yeah. So I think the law just changed in the last very recently. It's called a NOSI. So notice of security interest. I basically think that whole thing is illegal now. And the lawyer can just like delete. This is like brand new.
What do you mean?
Like what basically happened was all these real estate transactions, refinance, purchase, moving trucks were getting delayed because of like a $4,000 hot water tank. And I guess eventually people petitioned the government and they're like, yeah, this is ridiculous. It's crippling our entire industry. Like you can't do this anymore.
Like don't put the
Delete.
liens on it.
You can't put a lien on it. And again, there's layers. If someone put in a new furnace, you still owe them the money. But is it a lien no, like the lawyer can, I'm oversimplifying, click delete. It's called a NOSI, notice of security interest, and it's alleviated. This is brand new.
Yeah, it was definitely not an effect
Yeah.
when we did this
No,
because I can tell
no.
you this, everyone was up in arms over this
Yeah,
$12,000
yeah.
water heater.
Or the water heater company needs to postpone and then the lender doesn't like it and it creates hours and hours of work. And again, a lot of this is like fraud related or high pressure sales, people knocking on doors, tricking people into buying things they don't understand. So yeah, it's updated.
It's updated.
Yay, government.
The one thing that was done.
Yay, government.
Okay, my last question for you
Okay.
before we wrap this up. Prediction for 2025. What do you think is going to happen?
Ooh, so I think that's a tough one. I think if I were, let's call it like a young married couple or sort of first time buyer, I would be very interested to buy in the context that like I'm not flipping the property in 6-12 months. No one ever knows when the bottom is, but I think that there are deals out there. I think that rates are coming down. I think that if you're, good job, good money, good confidence, you want to start your family, your life, your household, I do think it's a good time to buy with a long-term time horizon. I think it's going to be a bit of just, I think there's going to be way more transaction volume. I think there's going to be more buyers, more sellers. Again, regulatory, there's easier mortgage rules, rates are coming down. There's going to be more transaction volume. And I think prices are, I think they're just going to kind of, move along plus or minus, like nothing crazy. But I think in the long run, I'm still bullish on Toronto real estate. So it's not, again, and you shouldn't be buying real estate if you're kind of looking at it in a 3, 6, 12, even 24, 36 month. You really should be looking at it at minimum 36 months plus. So I think that I'm bullish on Toronto, like in the long run.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be an early spring market, and the early spring market is going to start next week, which we won't know when this episode will launch. So I'm going to say the early spring market is going to.
I'm going to agree with you.
Is going to start the second week of January.
I
We're in the first
will
week right
say
now.
that I got much busier kind of, let's say July, August, September. And then I don't remember when, September, October, like November, December were like very, very busy. And I think that, December is always like a little bit weather, Christmas, back to like vacation mode. but I do think that it's
But
going
I
to be
think
an
we had a
early spring
busy
market.
December.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Like
saying.
this
Like
was,
November, December was like
and
one of my busiest.
let me tell you,
Yeah.
we would have gotten a lot more transactions
Yeah.
done even the week of the holidays, solely because, like, if there was inventory. Like, a lot of agents
Yeah.
tend to
Yeah.
pull their listings off the market
Yeah.
during the holidays
Yeah.
and then bring them back in the
Yeah.
new year.
Yeah.
But we were still hunting.
Yeah.
Like, I remember up until the
100%.
the 24th, I was actually still doing showings.
100%.
And it was like, if they let me
100%.
in, great. If they didn't let me in,
Yeah, no
like, I
problem.
guess we're gonna
Yeah.
see you in the new
Yeah.
year. But
Yeah.
like, I was still doing showings, and we
Yeah.
started back up the day of Boxing Day.
Yeah.
So like the 26th, we were out again.
Yeah.
There's just no new inventory, and there will be inventory next
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Once again, this is Elena Saradidis. This was Property Play. If you like content like this, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you so much, Elon, for joining us
Thank you.
today.